Manari Ushiwa. Yo soy Zapara de
I
Amazon
am Zapata
ecuatoriana. Mi
from
nombre
the
es Manari
Ecuadorian
Ushiwa.
Amazon.
Yo les voy a presentar
I am Manari
la
Ushiwa.
propuesta que
I'm going
estamos
to
trabajando,
present the proposal that we are working on
la sabiduría Shimaka.
regarding
La
the
sabiduría Shimaka
Shimaka wisdom.
es una forma de
This
enseñar la
is
sabiduría
a
de la
way
selva
of
para los
teaching
jóvenes
the
allá afuera, jóvenes,
wisdom of
niños
the forest
de
for
afuera.
the
Pero es con una
kids and the
intención,
youth from the outside.
nuestra intención no es
We do not intend to
proponer un nuevo modelo de educación,
propose a new
es aportar
education
al
model.
sistema de educación
It's just adding and
nuevas
contributing to this
perspectivas
education
desde la
system with a
sabiduría
new
de la
focus
selva.
coming from the
Dicho
wisdom
esto,
of the forest.
esta
Having said
propuesta
that, this
la hemos
proposal
hecho en frente de esta crisis ecológica
has been
que estamos
made
enfrentando, no
in
solo
the
en
face
Guatemala,
of
sino
this
a nivel mundial,
crisis that we are
porque nosotros,
fighting against,
como
not only us as
guardianes
Zapata,
de
but
la
everyone in
vida,
general,
de los
we
espíritus,
as
guardianes de la
custodians
vida,
of the spirits
no
and
hemos
life that
logrado cambiar la
have
forma
not been
tradicional de
able to
pensar,
change
la
the
forma
traditional
como la
way of
selva
thinking,
funciona,
the traditional
eh,
way that people think that
y hemos definido de
the
que
forest works.
el mundo es Nukaki,
We say that the world is Nukaki. It's one
donde la sabiduría se
where
mueve,
wisdom
donde la
moves
sabiduría no es estable, sino siempre está
and
en
it's not
movimiento.
like stable. It's always moving
También
around.
hemos dicho que la selva es
We
nada,
also say that
porque desde esa
the
selva
forest is not
podemos
because from there
conectar y
we
conocer
can connect
la nueva forma de
and get to
entender
know the new way of
la
understanding
evolución del
the
humano,
evolution of the
porque
human
la
being
selva con
because
ellos arriba, donde hay muchos árboles
the
juntos, donde se juntan, y ahí
rainforest
se
where
genera
you
una
have
sabiduría
many trees
cuando hay un movimiento
together
con el viento.
it creates a knowledge, a
Esa
wisdom,
sabiduría
and that
tiene
wisdom
una esencia de cuidar
has an essence
nuestro
of
conocimiento y también
taking
tiene
care of
una
our knowledge,
esencia de cuidar
and it also
la
has
medicina
the intent
por
of
nuestra
taking care
existencia.
of the medicine
Y
for our
asimismo,
existence.
los árboles más bajos,
So
donde
the
están
lower trees
muchos árboles pequeños,
where you find
generan también una
many small
sabiduría
trees, you
donde
create
estamos
another wisdom
conectados
where
nosotros,
we are
los humanos,
connected, us
con
as
ellos.
human beings, with them.
Y desde ese punto nosotros
And from
traemos
there,
una sabiduría
we
donde
bring
se
a
conecta
wisdom
a través del
that
mundo
it's
del
connected
Makihauno, a través de los sueños,
through the Makihauno
y
world, through the dreams,
conectamos con ellos en un
and we
mundo
connect with them
espiritual y
in the
traemos a este
spiritual
mundo
world, and we
una
bring to
nueva
this
manera de
world
entender la vida.
a new way of understanding
Entonces,
life.
para
So
entender eso, lo que
to
nosotros
understand
hemos
that,
escogido es
what
10 temas
we propose and
y
what we
10
have gathered
temas
are
en la
10
historia de la
themes
nacionalidad zápara. Nunca hemos
in
escrito
our
sobre esos 10
history.
temas, pero
As
ahora estamos
Zapata
escribiendo
Nation,
esos
we
10
have
temas.
never written these
Entonces,
10 themes,
lo que
but
les
now we
voy
are
a
doing it.
explicar es
So what
esta
I'm going to explain to
sabiduría que
you
se
is that
llama
this wisdom that it's
Kamungishi.
called Kamungishi.
Kamungishi es
Kamungishi
una manera de
is
entender la
a way
selva
of understanding
donde toda
the
la vida se
rainforest
está moviéndose, donde
where
nuestros
life is
mayores,
continuously moving,
nuestros
where our
abuelos, nuestros
elders, our
bisabuelos,
grandfathers, grandmothers,
ellos estudiaron
great
para ser
grandfathers, great grandmothers
grandes líderes espirituales en el mundo,
studied to be
para
great
mostrar
spiritual leaders,
cómo la vida
to
se está, hacia dónde se está yendo
let us
globalmente
know
hablando.
where life is
Entonces,
going. So Kamungishi, what teach,
a
teaches
nosotros
us
es
is
la relación que se habla. Cuando uno
the
se habla,
relationship, like when you
yo estoy
say,
conectado
I'm
con la
connected
tierra. Algunos
to
decimos
earth.
que estoy conectado con las
Some
plantas.
say, I'm connected to
Y ahí
plants.
hay una pregunta. Muchos dicen, ¿cómo se conecta
And
eso?
they question, how is
Eso se
this
conecta en nuestro
linked?
plato de comida.
That is
Cuando
linked through
nosotros
our
caminamos en la selva,
food. When we
cogemos una
walk through
fruta
the
de una planta
rainforest,
y
we
eso
pick
nos podemos
one
alimentar. Por
fruit
ejemplo, el cambe,
and we
que es
start
un
eating
cacao
it.
de la selva, rompemos eso y
El
empezamos
cambe,
a
that
comer.
it's cacao from the
¿Y qué
rainforest,
estamos
we
haciendo ahí?
open that and start
Saliendo
eating.
al
So what are we
centro
doing
del
there?
cuerpo
That
y
food
entra en
enters our
nuestras
body
células.
and enters
Y ahí
our
estamos
cells.
conectando
And that's where we
exactamente
are
esa
connecting
planta en qué situación se
to
encuentra.
that plant
Y vamos a
and
comenzar
with the state
a
that that
pensar
plant
igual que esa planta. Una
has. And
sensación
we start
libre.
thinking the same way
Vamos a
that the
tener
plant
una
does.
emoción donde dice que
There we're having
nosotros, ¿por qué
an
estamos
emotion that
usando demasiado nuestra
let
mente?
us know that we are
Vamos a
using
liberar
our mind
esas
too
ideas, nos va
much
a
instead
entrar a
of
nuestro cuerpo.
setting
Y
ourselves free.
asimismo, a través de esa planta,
So through that
vamos a
plan,
conectar con la
we're
tierra
going to connect,
para saber
be connected
exactamente
with
en
the
ese
earth
espacio
and to
cómo la
know
tierra está
how
funcionando.
exactly in that space
Y cuando
the
conectamos con
the
esa
soil
función y entramos en
is
el centro de la tierra,
working.
porque el
So we
centro de la
start going
tierra
to the
hay un
core
espacio, hay
of
una
the earth,
sabiduría
and
donde
there we have a wisdom
podemos encontrar
where we can
en ese
find
espacio para saber exactamente
and
encima de la
know
tierra
how
cómo se está moviendo la vida.
on the surface of the
¿Por qué
earth how
tenemos
life is
tantos
moving.
desastres naturales?
Why are we
Y
having
este
so many
centro
natural disasters?
donde están todos
And
los
this core
minerales,
where
esos
all the minerals
espíritus nos
are,
van a
and
contar
those spirits
y nos
are
cuentan,
going
y
to
dicen,
tell us.
por ejemplo, si hay un
And they tell
desastre,
us if there
dicen
is a
que,
natural disaster,
ahí está
they say,
reculando la
ah,
tierra, porque hay un
this is
calentamiento
where
global.
the earth
Y
is
como ese
trying to regulate
desastre
itself,
natural lo que está haciendo es
because
darle
we
un
have
impacto
this
a la
climate
tierra,
change,
porque ahí estamos
climate
nosotros, y
warming.
hay veces nos toca enfrentar,
Sometimes we have to
estamos en
face,
la ciudad y
sometimes
hay
in a city, maybe,
muchas personas se mueren.
where you have
Entonces,
many people dying.
la tierra nos da un mensaje a través de esos
So
desastres naturales. Entonces,
the earth
nosotros
is giving us a
estamos
message through those
conectados
natural
con las
disasters.
plantas. Y cuando estamos alimentando
That's the way
un
we
animal,
connect with plants, and
cuando
when we
estamos
are feeding an
conectados
animal,
con ese ser,
we are
conocemos qué está
connecting
pensando
with
ese
that
ser. Pero
being,
cuando hacemos todas las cosas
and we can
en
understand
este
what they
mundo
are thinking.
visible, donde todas las cosas se puede ver,
But in this
es
visible
algo
world where you can see
invisible pasa
everything,
eso. Pero si
that
nosotros
happens in
descansamos
an
y
invisible
dormimos y
way.
soñamos,
But if we go to
cuando
sleep
entramos
and
en
we
el mundo
dream,
espiritual vamos a
when
ver
we enter this
cada acción que
spiritual
nosotros
world,
hacemos,
we are going to see
cómo
that each
estamos,
action
qué estamos aprendiendo ahí.
of us
Pero vamos a vivir en práctica en mundo espiritual.
and
Y
what we
vamos
are
a
learning with that.
conversar con
So
ellos
we are going to
y
enter
vamos a
the spiritual world
entender cómo
and we are
están
going to
ellos
speak with them
y
and
qué
we are going to
ayuda
understand
necesitan
how
ellos
they are
de
and
parte
what
de
help do
nosotros.
they need from our
Y ahí
side.
se armoniza la vida, ahí nos
And that's
ayudamos
where
mutuamente. Decimos, ah, mira, si
life
tú me ayudas,
harmonizes
yo te
itself
voy a ayudar. Entonces,
and
el Kamungishi
we
se
put
trata de
ourselves in a
esa
context where
sabiduría
life says,
que
I'm lacking
queremos
this, so I'm
transmitir
going to help you and
a
provide
los
it to you.
jóvenes, a los niños
So youth,
de
kids
afuera, no de la selva,
that are
porque
not
en la
from
selva nuestros
the
jóvenes se aprenden
rainforest,
así.
we are trying
Entonces,
to bring them this
ese es
knowledge
uno de los
because
temas que vamos
our
a
kids,
empezar
our youth
a
already live
debatir,
with this,
a
already
enseñar
know about this.
a los jóvenes para que entiendan
So
y
what
sepan
we want to
que
teach
no es
the
necesario
youth is that they
estar
learn
contacto con la naturaleza,
that it's not
no es
necessarily
necesario estar parado
needed that
debajo
they
de un
are
árbol, decir yo estoy
standing
conectado
besides
con la
a
tierra.
tree to say that I'm
En
connected with
cualquier
it.
espacio podemos
In
estar
any space,
en un edificio,
we could be in a
porque ahí está
building,
nuestro alimento. Entonces, a través de ese
because there
alimento
is where we
nosotros
have our food.
conectamos
And
con
through that
todos los
food,
seres que
we are
viven alrededor de
connecting with
nuestra
all the
vida.
beings that live around
Y
our lives.
asimismo,
And at the same time,
eh, hemos escogido
we have
otro tema que es se llama NACU.
picked another theme that
NACU,
is Naku.
tenemos una
Naku
experiencia que hemos hecho
is
con
where we have
muchas
an experience
personas. Llevamos a la selva
with many people. We
para conectar
take
con la
them to the
sabiduría de la
rainforest
selva.
so they can connect
Entonces,
with the knowledge
digamos,
and the
pasamos
wisdom of the
una
rainforest.
víspera en la selva,
So when they arrive to the
limpiamos
rainforest,
plantas medicinales
we clean them with
con la selva. Pero ¿cómo lo hacemos eso? Lo hacemos,
medicine,
quitamos el olor de
herbs.
ciudad y ponemos
We
el olor de
take
la selva
out
y
from
a
them
través de ese olor
the
nos
smell of the
relacionan con la
city,
selva. ¿Qué
and
actividad
we
hacemos también? Ponemos
put
los
in them the
nombres
smell of the rainforest.
tradicionales en nuestro
And
idioma,
there we
dependiendo
put
esa
the names,
persona,
our traditional names, depending on the
qué trabajo está
person
haciendo,
and
y
what
ahí
work
definimos
they are
un
carrying out.
espíritu para esa persona,
And we define and choose
pintamos
one
la
spirit
cara
for that person, and we paint
y
their faces
ponemos ese nombre. Y después
and give them that
llegamos al
name.
río y
Then we go to the
comenzamos a
river
nadar en el río.
and we
Cuando
swim
comenzamos a nadar en
in
el
it.
río, lo que estamos haciendo es
When we swim in it, what we are
conectar
doing
con
is
el
connecting
espíritu del agua para
with
purificar
the
nuestros pensamientos,
spirit of the
limpiar
water
nuestro pensamiento,
to clean
trabajar con
our
nuestras
thoughts,
emociones,
to connect with
y
our
llegamos
emotions.
al lugar donde se van a
And
quedar.
then we arrive to the
Y
place
ahí,
where they are
si
going to stay.
llegan, lo que hacemos ahí
Then
es
they arrive there, and what we do there is that
más tarde hablamos
later
sobre el
we
mundo de Makijauno.
speak
El Makijauno es el
about
mundo de
the
los sueños
Makihauno
y
world.
cómo se
That's
conecta con
our
ese mundo.
dream world and how we
Y
connect
lo que
with that
hacemos ahí es un
world.
trabajo de que cada
There we
persona
do a
van a
work
soñar y
where
recordar
each
ese
people are
sueño
going to dream
y nos
and
van a
remember that
contar al
dream,
día siguiente.
and then they are going to
Entonces,
spoke
para
to us
nosotros,
about that
cuando nos
dream.
comienzan a contar los
So
sueños,
when they start telling
nosotros
us their dream,
sabemos exactamente
we know
en
exactly
qué situación se encuentra
in
ese
which
cuerpo
situation
y cómo está su
is their
conexión
body
con su
and
vida
how is their
y
connection
con su espíritu
with their
principal.
life and their
Y eso
spirit,
sabemos de acuerdo como ellos sueñan.
and
Entonces,
that we
si
get that knowledge through
trabajamos,
their dream.
si el sueño es mucha
So if the
mezcla,
dream
eso quiere
it's
decir
like
que
a
no
mix
está
of
bien
many things,
alineado con el cuerpo
it
y con
means
el
that it's not
espíritu.
well
Y
aligned
eso
with
alineamos.
the body and the
Hay
spirit.
personas que
So we
sueñan
are
bien
aligning
claro
it,
las
align
cosas,
it.
entonces eso quiere decir que todo su cuerpo está bien. Entonces,
So
a esa persona subimos a
the
otro nivel para que
person that
comience
is
a
well
trabajar su
connected,
relación
we
en su
take
trabajo
it
de donde vino.
to
¿De
another
qué
level.
país vino?
So
Entonces, en ese lugar
we start
comenzamos a
working
trabajar. Entonces,
through first
esa
with the place
experiencia
where they were born or where
es
they
lo que
came from,
queremos poner
and we
en
start working from
práctica
there. That's the
para
experience
poder
that we want to put
entender
into practice
lo que
so we can
somos
understand
como humanos.
what we are as human
Porque a
beings.
veces
Because
nosotros nos
sometimes
ponemos en una
we
diferenciamos con otras especies.
make some differences
Nosotros no
between
somos
us and
diferentes.
other
Nosotros
species,
somos
and we are not
parte de ese
different.
sistema de
We are
vida,
part of
pero
this
para
life
conocer, para
system.
entender eso, tenemos que
But
ir al mundo
to
de
understand that,
Makijauno,
we have to go
porque desde este
to the
lugar
Makihauno
no
world,
podemos ver eso, porque
because
pasa
if we
algo
are in this
invisible.
other
Entonces,
reality, we
esa
cannot see
práctica
that
lo
because
ponemos
something invisible happens.
y ahí experimentamos lo que
So there we
queremos saber,
experience
lo que
what we want to
queremos
know
saber más que todo de nuestra vida, de
from
nuestros
our life,
negocios,
from
si
our
tenemos, si somos
businesses,
profesores, para
if we are
saber
teachers,
cómo tengo que enseñar
to
a mis
know
alumnos
how they can
y
teach their
con qué
students
metodología tengo que
and
orientarlos
what
para enseñar lo que ellos
with
tienen que
what
saber, porque vamos a ver en
methodology
práctica
I have to
muchas
teach
cosas.
them so they can get the
Eso es lo
knowledge
que
that they want.
nosotros con la
So
sabiduría de Shimaka
with this Shimaka
queremos
wisdom,
comenzar a enseñar.
that's what we want to
Porque
start
la
teaching,
sabiduría de Shimaka es
because
una
the
sabiduría
Shimaka wisdom is
que es
one
vivo,
wisdom
porque
that
es
is
hablado de los
living,
seres vivos que somos nosotros, y
because
también
it comes
vamos a
from
hablar
us,
de otros seres que
living
en ese
beings, and
momento
we are
se ven
going to speak about other beings that can be represented as plants. If we touch them, they don't cry. But if we see it from the spiritual world, we can see that this is not a leaf, it's a being, and that's the wisdom that we want to pass to the youth. But we also want to do this because from the rainforest, when we enter this Makihauno world, the dream world, what we are seeing is that the modern world likes to speak to the future. So that future, we see that it's having some struggles. And we are seeing that they are inventing many things for the future to experiment, to change our human evolution, but it also has challenges and problems. So the rainforest represents the past because the rainforest in there the life is stable, it's balanced, it doesn't change that much. So when something happens in the space, when the sun changes, when the moon comes out, there there are some changes, but they are not natural changes. So that is the wisdom from the past. And when we move forward to the future, what we find is that is a wisdom where the great thinkers that are in that world in the future, they are going to say, look back to the past where life started. So where life started is there in that rainforest where we have all the cultures of the world. And there is where we have the answer to solve any situation that we are facing. So that's why we self define that we are guardians of the past world. And that's why we want to propose some ideas. Now we're discussing with alongside with the Shimaka wisdom, living economy. And what is that? That's where nothing that we touch in the rainforest can start having a living concept. Because, for example, the gold, we don't eat it. But if we really thought about, really think well about it, it's better to have the gold on earth, because if it stays there, our life will be assured because it will be balanced. If we speak about oil, this is a very interesting element, because when you look at the core of the earth, it tells you what is going to happen in the future on the surface of the earth. So what happens if we take it out and burn it? We are moving those beings. Then they will not want to share with us. So for us, those beings are beings that help us to understand what happens in the world, what is going to come and what is going to happen. So for us, if we understand this way, if we want to research this, there we can find something very interesting, and it's very interesting to research that. But if those minerals stay on earth, on the soil, and we don't touch them, we can see that we are going to change our perspective. So the Shimaka wisdom that speaks about everything being moving around, we want to bring this wisdom to understand and teach other people. Shimaka, in its wisdom center, says that when we are learning something and we start opening our hearts, our emotions too much, then we start loading too much information into that, and we don't know how to like set ourselves free from that information. So the Shimaka wisdom says that we have to open up like a flower that is just flourishing little by little. So if we keep it there, like just at the stage where it's beginning to flourishing, and we harmonize our knowledge and the medicine and everything there, then life will be in perfect balance without stress and without other illnesses that can enter our body. So the Shimaka wisdom says that we don't have to open up too much, just the necessary. So that teaches us not in this reality, it teaches us in the dream world. So we have spoke with Eduardo in a very long discussion, taking Jaunecca to start working, because people in these times need to charge a new energy and have a new wisdom so we can heal our bodies. Because if we not do it like that, we are going to start having problems with our thoughts. We are going to have our thoughts loaded, and we don't know how to get rid of that. So for me, to get into the conclusion, is what I can say to you is that this wisdom that's coming from the rainforest, and this wisdom that's going to come from the teachers of the rainforest, is going to be a medicine for us, not only thinking about the teachers, but also for the scientists, because they also get stressed. So we are also thinking about them. So the Shimaka wisdom isn't a wisdom that is proposing a new educational system. Rather, it is proposing a waking up wisdom where we are pressing in here in these times to understand the human evolution and where it is going towards more strongly. So that's where we are creating this proposal of Shimaka wisdom along with Eduardo, Olivia, and many other people.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay. Gracias, Manari. Fue súper lindo, como siempre. If that's okay,
Thank
we
you,
will go
Manari.
straight into the next
Very
response.
inspiring
The
as
first
always.
So I'm going to respond in a few minutes. Before I do so, I just want to make sure, quiero asegurarme que Manali puede escuchar la traducción al español, porque tengo que hablar en inglés. Is the translation working? ¿Está funcionando la traducción?
The translation from Spanish to English works well.
So,
the translation from the Spanish was.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's before I start, it's just working to English to Spanish. Just playing with that. You guys can work it. But then I'll just get started. So I want to just offer a few comments on Manati's really interesting presentation. And I want to do so as an anthropologist. I am an anthropologist, it's my job, it's my profession, but I want to think about anthropology a bit more generally as a way of being, is not necessarily just a job. In that sense, I want to reflect on what Manati said in terms of two major themes. One under the topic of diplomacy and the other under the topic of leadership. So Shimaka is a really interesting initiative. It's an initiative to move knowledge, to move living wisdom, and I want to think about that in terms of diplomacy. So I think of anthropology as a form of, sometimes I call it sort of a form of cosmic diplomacy. It's a term I borrow from Eduardo Viveros de Castro and Bruno Latour, in the sense that anthropology is often concerned with moving among different, radically different worlds, and trying to understand them as part of something larger. And that's something that Manati refers to with that word nukaki in Sapara, something, a larger whole. Anthropologists, all of us in some ways do this. We go into a strange world, or a world that's made strange by the methods we bring to it, and we see in it something that through hard work comes to make sense as a larger whole. In that sense, as diplomats, as people who translate between worlds, we're also in some ways leaders, in the sense that we can sort of understand where something is headed. We can understand the story of something. I want to keep that in mind as I just reflect briefly on Manati's, what Manati was talking about the Shimaka Living Wisdom Educational Initiative. It too is very much a form of diplomacy. And diplomacy, as Bruno Latour reminds us, is always carried out for some reason. It's a way of bringing different, seemingly opposing opinions together because we all share something that we're concerned about. In this case, what we're concerned about is a planetary ecological and climate crisis that's threatening all of us. And as a diplomatic endeavor, I think it's really what Shimaka is really interesting. Of course, one of the obvious ways in which it's a diplomatic endeavor is the way in which it seeks to bring together indigenous knowledge from the rainforest and modern, not what you call modern knowledge from a world where things like technology dominate. And Shimaka has been growing, and there's been many different facets that it's explored. What Manati has mainly been talking about is bringing knowledge from the rainforest to, we could call the modern world. But Manati is also, as part of the larger iteration of this project, is also interested in what kinds of ways Western science could come into the Amazon as well. So in moving in the other direction as well has been a concern of this project from the beginning. So that's one kind of diplomacy, of course, that one between indigenous forms of knowledge and modern, or you could say Western forms of knowledge. The other kind of diplomacy is in terms of the movement between the everyday world and the spirit world. So that's another facet of this form of diplomacy. And that also goes in two directions. In some ways, the spirit world is the most important one. That's the hidden one that we can't always see. But we're trying to, we sometimes gain access to it from the everyday world, and we're trying to learn to live better in the everyday world through it. The other form of diplomacy that's really interesting, Manati and I have been working on several initiatives since we began working together around about 7 years ago. And it involves very interesting forms of mixed methods that are both indigenous and methods that are that we can think of as quote unquote modern. So one of the ones that that he and I have been most interested in are mixing certain kinds of methods of seeing this larger whole through dreams and through tobacco and other medicines with other techniques and technologies such as writing, especially. So we think a lot about writing on the one hand and these other forms of thinking on the other hand. So that's a couple of comments under the category of diplomacy. I want to also think about the term leadership. The Shimaka Initiative is in some ways, its goal is in some ways to create leaders, to train young people in our society to see the world in another way, to learn to think about it in this diplomatic way, from the point of view of the spirits. And what's interesting, I think, about that is, first of all, it seeks to train young people in the West, especially, in that vision. But it also has to train Sapara youth to become the people who will carry that vision as well. As Manati says, the Sapara youth grow up with this, but they aren't necessarily teaching it to a larger world. So that form of leadership is really important. And I just want to emphasize that that there's an obvious connection between the leadership for the Ecozoic Initiative and the Shimaka Initiative in terms of that leadership and in terms of the topic, of course. Essentially, this Manati's, or the Sapara version of what an Ecozoic world looks like, is one in which we can create a space of mutual non-human flourishing by our ability to see our forms of interaction with that world from the spirit world. Just an aside about diplomacy there, a lot of my own work involves looking at that particular diplomatic move between the spirit world and the everyday world, and doing my own kind of diplomacy with it to understand how that's not just something that I need to be asked to just believe, but how it can also make sense in other idioms, scientific ones. It's also interesting in that way, Manati is also doing that form of diplomacy. And I wanted to mention two things that he talked about in the talk. One is the Kamungishi Initiative, which is precisely, much of it is going to be done online. It's not so much about bringing the trees of the rainforest into the world, into other worlds. It's about allowing people to see the forest around them everywhere, in the city, as he's saying. Wherever you live, we all live in a world called forest. We all live in Naku because we're all part of this living world. And I think part of what Manati's saying is to allow us to see that. But there are many strategies and the other strategy that Manati and the Saparas use is actually allowing people to have a first-person experience in the rainforest as well. That's what he mentioned, the Naku center that they've created. And that's also interesting because if you compare other, in some communities, I'm thinking of Sarayaku, a neighboring community where people speak a lot about Kausaksacha, the living forest. A lot of the political work that's being done is to get legal recognition for the territory in that community as a living forest. And in some sense, the work being done there is in some ways, the political work is sort of from the third person, if you will. That is convincing others to recognize that this other place is a living forest. And it's been quite important and quite successful. What's really striking and interesting about the Sapara Initiative is to allow others to feel that for themselves. one, to find it in themselves in their everyday life. That is the goal of the Kamungishi Initiative, or to go to the forest and be there and experience it in that way as well. And just I want to close on two other quick thoughts. One of the things that's very interesting about how Manari sees leadership from the talk we just heard, and also from my knowledge of other, from a deeper knowledge of this project, is always this, that knowledge is always an ethical project. It's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. And that's why the word wisdom is so important here. And wisdom as medicine, that is a way to understand how to correct ourselves, to understand the path that we need to go on, and then to actually make an effort to get on and stay on that path. And I think, if you think of medicine as a kind of corrective or an orthogonal sort of practice. And I think one of the things that's very interesting about so much of what I've learned from Manari has to do with how that ethical path is something that we discern. Sorry, let me just step back. Ethics in some ways is always about the future. It's a speculative project. It's what would be good. But for Manari and for the forest, that always comes from the past. Leadership is a form of understanding the story that connects the past through the present to a possible future. And I think that that's something really interesting. So these two ideas of leadership and diplomacy are what I wanted to emphasize in Manari's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. We will move on to our last speaker, Professor Michelelli, who's also going to be speaking for about 15 minutes.
You want to do an introduction?
Oh, sorry, we got cut off at the introduction side. Sorry about that. Of course, so Professor Michelelli is a full professor of anthropology at the Pontificia Universidad in Colombia, in Bogota. And her work, she works in the Amazon forest as well, and is involved in a variety of projects, among which is a project that Ivan is also involved in with the Inga people around the creation of an indigenous university. And Giovanna has been very involved in that project too. So she will be responding to Manari and perhaps hopefully telling us a little bit about the project as well. So whenever you're ready, over to you, Professor.
Sí. Bueno, muchas gracias, Livia. Si está bien, voy a hablar en español. Podría hablar.
Thank you very much, Livia. If that's okay, I'm going to speak in Spanish. I wanted to speak in English, but I think it's better to speak in Spanish first of all. I want to thank Manari Ishiwa for this presentation. I didn't know the project before. When Ivan invited me, I started to read and study what I found. And I had a wrong idea because I thought that this project, this educational project, was a way of transforming the education that indigenous peoples receive in the Amazon region. And it's not like that. Now I am understanding. And I also see now that there is a very deep message regarding to wake up, and it goes for the people that live outside the rainforest, and that is surprising for me. I'm talking to you from Bogota, and it's difficult to connect to the rainforest from a city that has more than 9 million inhabitants. But the fact that this possibility is there, for me, is incredible, and it's it's very inspiring as well. I have a lot of questions. Something that called my attention about what Manari Ishiwa said is that those connections are our food. The food that we eat in the city is something that I don't know what is going to connect us to. So if there's this connection through food, that it should connect us to the food sources, and also it should be a political act in that sense, because through food, that it is not a food that connects us to the rainforest. It's more like a food that shows us our lack of connection to other beings. A question that I have for Manari is, how do you assess this knowledge, this wisdom? That's the first question on assessment. I worked through many years with peoples on coca and tobacco. We carried out different processes with this in different parts, mainly in the Colombian and Amazon region. And I recently started working with the Inga people in Colombia that want to start a university in the rainforest as an alternative to common and ordinary universities. So these indigenous peoples have been my masters throughout the years for more than 25 years. They state something similar regarding to also what Professor Eduardo was saying, that is, when building a future, when humanizing the future, we have to look at our origin, at our roots, the word of life that is always present. And through these words, life has been created. So they talk about humanizing the future, making it more human. And in the beginning, Ivan's work in the leadership for Ecozoic, he said that they are looking for a new paradigm for a more hopeful future. I also wanted to ask Manari Ishiwa, how do you think that this pedagogic proposal can help us to envision, and build this hopeful future? So let's say that those are the two questions that I have. And I'm fascinated by the idea that this knowledge is being transmitted out of the rainforest. It's fascinating to me, but I don't understand how, without being connected to the water of a stream, without connecting to the food that has been produced in crops, foods that have been produced by people, by their bodies, their work, throughout practice. So in your presentation, you emphasized a lot the importance of the work and the method that includes different names, cultures, taking a bath in the stream, the food, all of these things and the practical activities that help to connect with a world and being conscious about us as a part of everything. So how do you, in order to make a summary, how do you assess this knowledge and how this future is being built from the past, from the world, from this wisdom of the origin? Thank you very much.
Hola, ¿puedo responder?
Sí, claro.
Can I reply?
Ya.
Yeah.
A ver,
Well,
¿cómo se evalúa el conocimiento del mundo
how can you
histórico?
assess the knowledge of the world? Yeah, the true knowledge.
Verdadero.
What is the true knowledge
Para nosotros,
for you?
el conocimiento
For us,
verdadero,
the true knowledge
no está en una persona.
is not in
No,
a
no
person.
tenemos respuesta nosotros como
We don't
humanos.
have
La
an
respuesta
answer
está en
as humans.
varios seres.
The answer can be
Por
found
ejemplo,
in
el
different
espíritu
beings.
del petróleo responde una
For
parte,
example, the oil
el
spirit
espíritu de las plantas
answers one part,
responden
the
otra
plant
parte,
spirits answers
el
another part,
espíritu de los minerales,
the spirit of the minerals,
uranio, todos ellos
gold, copper, etc.
responden de otra
They
manera.
give
Lo que
another
sí hay
answer.
es, por eso nos sirve este camino de entrar
That's
en
why
espiritual a través de la técnica de
this
soñar. Soñamos, entramos ahí.
path
Y
of
cuando
entering
tenemos
this
todas
world
esas
through dreams,
respuestas, nosotros tenemos que unir para
when
entender
we
lo
have
que
all the answers,
necesitamos
we have to
entender eso.
gather together so we can
Entonces
understand
ahí se pone en palabras
it.
para esa
So there
gente,
we put some
¿entiendes?
words
Por ejemplo,
and you
lo que
understand.
lo que dicen estos seres es que
What
en
these
este
beings
tiempo
say is
el
that
humano
in
estamos
these times,
preparándonos
we as humans are
para
preparing
ser otros seres,
to become
porque ya hubo
other
un
beings
cambio del nuevo
because
ser.
there
Nuestro
we
ser
already
está
had a
cambiando
change
paso por paso. Por
of
eso
a new sun
hay,
because our cells are
los
changing
alimentos
step by step.
que comenzamos a comer comienza a
There, the
cambiar
foods
algunos
that we
ejemplos.
start
Por
eating
ejemplo,
start changing.
hay
For
personas que ya no
example,
comen carne. Hay
there are some
personas
people
que
that
comen
do not
carne.
eat meat now.
Hay personas que
There are
ya
some people
están
that do.
dejando de comer nada, casi nada,
There are people that
solo las
are
calorías.
almost eating
Entonces,
nothing, just eating
estas
plants.
sabidurías lo que dicen es que
So these wisdoms,
estos
what they
ejemplos
say
el
is that
gran cambio que el humano está
these
tomando.
are examples of the big
Pero
change that
nosotros
humans
para
are
asegurar eso tenemos que hablar con
experiencing.
ellos para que nos expliquen y
But
entender.
to assure this, we have to speak with
Entonces,
them
nosotros en
so we can
esto
understand
nos
them.
estamos
So in these
enfrentando
times, we
una
are
crisis que hemos
facing
creado los
a,
humanos, porque somos
a crisis
demasiados.
that we have created.
La respuesta para
The
resolver
answer
eso
to
es
solve
muy
this
fácil de entender.
is very easy to
Nosotros
understand
no podemos chocar con los impactos que hemos causado.
because
No
we
nos
cannot
chocamos con esos impactos. Nos
crash
confundimos más.
against these changes
Lo
that
que
we
dice
have
es que
created, these
el
impacts that we have
espíritu de
created.
la tierra, lo que dice es que no hay que chocar,
The
sino
earth
proponer una salida,
spirit says that we don't have
pero de
to
una manera con
crash
tanta
into
delicadeza, como
them,
dijo el Eduardo
bump
entonces,
into them, but
cuidando
rather
mucho la diplomacia
going
espiritual
another way,
y hacemos
taking
un
care of
proyecto para prepararnos
the
esta
spiritual
gran
diplomacy
transformación
to
que el
go
humano
to another way
con el
and
tiempo
go
vamos a
towards
desaparecer de
this
esta tierra.
big
Seremos otros
evolution because
seres
we as
que
humans
vivirán en
are
esta
going to
tierra
disappear
y
from the
compartirán
earth
un
at
mundo
one point and we are
y
going to
después
become
vendremos otra
other
vez.
beings and it's
Entonces,
going to take a
esta
long
tierra
time and then we
es
will become
nuestro
humans
hogar,
again.
es nuestra casa.
So
No hay
this,
que
the
asustarnos
earth
ni
is our
temer
home.
nada, solamente
We don't have to
tenemos que
be
ir
scared or
evolucionando y
scream.
aceptando los
We just have
cambios que nos
to
ofrece por la tierra.
go
Estamos
with the
viviendo
flow
encima de una
of the
selva.
evolution and change.
La otra pregunta,
The other question,
lo que yo estaba explicando
well, what
es
I was explaining was
sobre
that
los alimentos, sobre plantas
regarding
y comida.
the food,
No importa Que tú estés en una
It
ciudad,
doesn't matter that you are in a city and you eat rice. The rice, where is it coming from? You can eat potato. You can eat fish in a can. Where are these foods coming from? They come from the earth, the water. What is important is understanding that these beings, they are living beings. They are not going to leave their body so easily. They are going to take care of their spirits. Even if they cannot food, their spirit will be there. So when you eat them, you are connecting with those spirits. So if one day you eat too much and you feel like heavy, you sleep, and then you are going to dream with a heavy feeling. The wisdom of the Makihao, it's confusing. So that's what you have to take care of. But the traditional way of doing this in the rainforest is different. We as indigenous people, we do it with another methodology. The way we live in this environment is different. It's another reality. But in the city, you have another reality. And the cultures of the world, each of them has their roots, have their stories, their religions, their beliefs. So in respect of that is how they are going to connect with this food. And that's where we are having this human evolution that we have to understand. It is not in the technology evolution, the wisdom. Wisdom is present in our food. So another question that you were making, I think it was about a hopeful future. I guess you said that future, hopeful future, we have to live each day because we cannot wait for something that is going to happen in the future. If we do that, we are going to be losing the time, our time to live. If we do not live in the present time, then we are driven by the time spirit. The time spirit is materialized in a plant that it calls chiricasqui. If we connect with that spirit, what is going to happen is that we're going to manage the hopeful future in our favor. And we are going to achieve that, achieving the well living. The things that we are going to do are going to be present and conscious in that place. Because for us, the past wisdom, we did a test in the spiritual world to see the future that is going to come. That future doesn't exist. The future is in our head. It's in our plans.
Nos dice que hay que esperar eso.
That tell us that we have to wait for that. But if we walk towards those plans and that future that we are thinking about, what is going to happen is that it's going to take us back to the start of life, because there we have the answer. The answer is that when life started, all the things that we built, the thing that we found, were aligned to the nature. Nothing that we ate disappeared. But now it's not like that. Now we have created things that can last millions of years and it cannot dissolve. They stay there. So those are some learnings that we are going to get when we go to the past. But we have to be present so we can understand that. Because if you're not there, you don't experience life, not with this body, but with the invisible body, and to tell that story, it's going to be difficult. When you get there, we are going to see, oh yeah, this is the future that we're waiting, but we have to test it and to create a theory, we have to go there and then create it. That's where with Eduardo, we are using this methodology of using plants so we can go and enter this spiritual world, because in our head, what happens is that we feel it and create many questions and receive answers, and maybe sometimes they are not useful for us, but they stay there. Let's speak about tobacco. What tobacco does is that cutting this thought and make us rethink about what is useful in our brain, in what is not useful.
Otra puerta. Y esa puerta es lo más importante para encontrar nueva
Put
sabiduría.
us in a cage, and then when we set it free, then we go to another space.
Encontrar nuestra medicina.
And there we are going to find our medicine. When we speak about medicine, because if our wisdom is not connected to a medicine to heal our body, then that wisdom is not good for the body. It's going to make us sick. So what the Shimaka wisdom, what it proposed is that it's a wisdom where we have to experience everything as humans so we can understand what we are. What I'm saying sounds like a story that nobody can experience. That's how it sounds. But if you someday take a decision how Eduardo did of going to the rainforest, sitting with us, going through this experience, and go through this unique way of understanding life, there you can say, oh, this does work. That's how you have to do it. Because the theory of solving everything by teaching this wisdom only to ourselves, that's not going to solve anything. That's just keeping that wisdom and that knowledge for us. If you see me with this crown and with this custom, that's not the Zapara life experience and knowledge. When you go there, is where you get this wisdom, because you go there to that world, and together we create this path to understand. Thank you.
A lot of questions. We'll start with a question from the room, and then we'll take a question from Zoom. So we'll move between one and the other. So let's start here in the room. Does anyone have a question?
Question or comment as well.
Sorry?
Question or comment?
Question or comment? Should we take a look online?
Don't have any questions thus far. If anyone's joining us from Zoom has a question, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat box.
Okay, so perhaps you do, Jeff, please.
Yeah, this is fascinating for me. So and you know, just the idea of sort of connecting with the dream world, I feel like I'm a little in that space now. But one thing that came out here, if I was listening and connecting, right, was the idea of knowledge from the outside sometimes being perceived as too much. And I guess I was hearing too much, a little dangerous. kind of like, whoa, slow down all this knowledge machine you're bringing in here. In thinking that in the lines of wisdom and in lines of translation and diplomacy, you know, I just was, it connected, you know, I think it translated to me to some ideas that we have within, you know, Western science and knowledge systems, things that often get swept away or minimized, things like precaution, things that we have in you know, outside of Manari's world, that are also saying there are danger signs because of too much knowledge. I don't know if I was hearing that right, but I don't know, that kind of created a moment in this whole conversation for me. And I just wonder if anyone else connected with that, or if I was hearing that right, or if that's making any sense to anybody.
Thanks, Jack. Manari, could you hear? ¿Puedes oír? ¿Te han traducido bien?
Sí, escuché.
Yeah. ¿Quieres, would you like to respond or?
Respondo la pregunta.
If you
Puedo
want,
responder.
if you have a comment or an answer to the question, yes, please.
Respondo la pregunta.
Yes.
Sí.
Sí.
Allá. Bueno, yo en ningún momento le dije que es peligroso el conocimiento del mundo moderno.
I didn't say that the knowledge of the modern world is dangerous. What I was saying is that
Que duran
there are things that we have built that last too long, for too much, and they don't dissolve, they don't disappear. But the knowledge from the modern world, it's a wisdom that has made us understand other realities, but looking at our own history as humans, how we have been evolving.
Nos da a nosotros un camino de pensar y
That-
valorar
That's a
lo que
path
es nuestro
for
conocimiento
us
de la selva,
to think about our knowledge on the rainforest, because, well, I'm speaking from my perspective. And for us, for the people who live in the rainforest, this is something that makes us think that everything, all the things that we see in the modern world are also in the spiritual world. And that's something that goes concrete. So doing that concretization is very fascinating for us. And us in the rainforest are also, we are also carrying out different actions more aligned with no changing the natural functioning of the earth. But the modern world has brought many things to this world. We have built many things, and I include myself in this because I am also here. I'm also part of this history. So what I was saying is that now we have to learn to change our way of thinking, because the earth is barely continuing with the way that we're living now. So we're going through this climate crisis that is a crisis that is not so difficult to solve, because the earth itself would solve it. It has an answer, but it is eliminating us. So we have to be conscious about that. So those are the different knowledges that we are proposing in our project, Shimaka. We are not ignoring the historical process of each culture in the world, but our wisdom that was in the rainforest, that was only for us, we are now opening the door and showing others and telling others, look, this knowledge maybe can be useful for your culture too. We are not saying this is what you have to do. No, we are just telling you, check your way of living, your way of educating, of learning science. Check that. Nothing else. Professors, students, people, this wisdom must be transformed into something harmonized with our life, aligned with our life, but also with medicine. We're always talking about medicine because a wisdom or knowledge that is not aligned with medicine is going to cause us that we lose ourselves. There are many people from different parts of the world that migrate, they travel to different places, and they want to find a future, and they do not find it. Time passed, they are old now, and now they're thinking, what do we do now? We don't want that to happen. What we want is that in each step we give, we have to be present and conscious. If we learn something, we must be present in that moment to learn and to understand and to harmonize that wisdom. That's what we are contributing because we have had some conversations with different people, also with scientific communities. They are telling us, are we sick? Aren't we sick? Professors, who are asking you, are you okay? Are you not okay? What we want is that someone who teaches, someone who is researching, that is looking for answers, has to be okay, has to be healthy. That's what the earth needs in order to make life more in harmony. So it is very important to go to the spiritual world, to dream, to take what we live here to that world and clean. You leave there the things that are not useful for you, and you come back with a new wisdom and a new knowledge. Chimaka wisdom is not to compete with anyone. It is just presenting another wisdom to foster the sciences, the progresses, and to frame maybe this activity. But it's important to understand well that each knowledge is to take care of the life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manari. So we have time for one final question. Anybody? Of course. Giovanna?
Si hay alguien más que quiere intervenir, yo ya hablé, pero me parece muy interesante lo que estaba
If there's
diciendo.
anyone else that wants to ask something, you can do it. I already talked, but I think it's very interesting what Manari was just saying. I lived 8 years there, and they say that a lot of knowledge can make you sick. Through different plants, you can manage knowledge. And this accumulation is the opposite of abundance. So the knowledge has to be focused on the overall well-being. And the way of assessing this true knowledge is in the body. Something that professors in university, sometimes we see our students and ourselves a bit stressed. And true knowledge is a relief. It's not stress. True knowledge is something sweet, it's refreshing, it's in harmony. So in a session where knowledge is being transmitted, they listen to the kids. They use plans and they listen to the kids. If kids are complaining, it means that they are not going on the right path. The knowledge is not being focused on the well-being. So I think it's important to think of these resonances, these different knowledges, different wisdoms of the Amazon people. The Inga people that we have worked with, also they use a key plant that is used when transmitting knowledge, and that is going to be used as well in the Indigenous University.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna. So we have come to the end of this really incredible event. So thank you to our speakers, thank you to Manari, of course, thank you to Professor Mitarelli, and thank you to Professor Kohn. Just a few very quick final remarks. Massive thank you as well to Ivan for organizing the event, and to Bobby and to Daisy, who's connected online, for making it possible and facilitating the event. And thank you to the funders, to the sponsors for this event. So the L4E network, the Leadership for the Ecozoic network, and CICADA, the Center for Indigenous Conservation and Development Alternatives. I think we'll see a lot more of Manari, and there'll be other moments to connect. So sorry there wasn't enough time for more questions. Of course, we all know what happened. And thank you all for being here, both online and in person. And for whoever can, let's go to Thompson's house for a drink.